Welcome to Plymouth Church Sunday Forum. My name is Rebecca Miller, and I'm a member of the Sunday Forum Committee. Sunday Forums are opportunities for conversations about faith and life, and the committee seeks to provide a thoughtful and welcoming learning environment for all of our members and friends of Plymouth Congregational Church. So thank you for joining this morning. And today, our guest is Eva Moremi. She's author of Hidden Recipes, a Holocaust memoir. Eva grew up in Czechoslovakia. She was the only child. And shortly after graduating from economics school, she escaped from the communist regime and immigrated to the United States. And she lives in Minneapolis with her husband, near their children, their grandchildren. She likes to read, do yoga, travel, cook, bake, and spend time with her family and friends. So this morning she'll share the story about this memoir that she wrote, Hidden Recipes. And it's a story of endurance, a will to survive, courage, faith, and finding joy and happiness again. And we look forward to hearing her stories, and I think she'll read a little excerpt as well. I also wanted to mention that for if you have questions, we'll end at 9:10, and if you have questions, please write them in the Q&A portion. If you'd like to chat with each other, say hi to someone, you can use the chat feature to do that. So, Eva, I turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Rebecca, for your kind introduction. And thank you to you and to Tim for inviting me to speak here today. I'm honored to be here with all of you and share with you the story of my parents. As Rebecca mentioned, I was born in Czechoslovakia. I grew up without grandparents, and I knew them only from the stories that my parents told me. I knew that I was different because all my friends had grandparents and they had a large family, and I did not. So I began to ask questions from my parents at a young age, and they always answered my questions and gave me simple answers when I was young, as not to scare me, but they never silenced me or dismissed me. They answered the questions age appropriately. I'm going to share with you so this is the book. This is the Hidden Recipes. Why did I decide to publish a book? Initially, I intended to write just as a family history book for my children and grandchildren only. But today there is such a shocking rise in hate and in anti-Semitism, and the Holocaust denial and distortion of history are so frequent that as a second generation Holocaust survivor, I felt that it is not only my responsibility, but also my obligation to tell the story, to go public with it. And I did it in hope that younger generation who knows so little about the Holocaust, that they will learn. And also because Holocaust started with hateful words. And sharing the story, I'm doing it in hope of a kinder and more compassionate world. We have the power to make better choices, and we must strive to make the world a better place for everyone. The horrors of the Holocaust must never be forgotten and must never happen again. So these are my parents. The first photo is they are on their honeymoon, And the other photo is 50 years later. They were married almost 60 years. And the book, Hidden Recipes, is the story of my parents. But Elena and Ernest was their name, but in the book I refer to them as Itza and Ernu, because this is how they were called by family and friends. My parents did not know each other before the war. Actually, my father was married before the war. He had a wife and a little girl, a daughter by name Marika. So they didn't know each other, but they both were born in Austria-Hungary. And the Austro-Hungarian Empire collapsed at the end of World War I, and the first Czechoslovak Republic was established. So life was very good in Czechoslovakia under Tomáš Garrigue Masaryk, who was the first president. And my mother, Itza, had a happy childhood, and they had a comfortable life. Her father, my grandfather, owned a textile business. And her parents decided to hire a German governess. They wanted her to learn German because they spoke German, Hungarian, and later Czechoslovak. She was an only child until age 15, when her little sister Vera was born. So here is my mother, Itza, and her baby sister Vera. They never called her Vera. The family and friends always called her Babi. And Itza, when she was older, was sent to a German school in Brno. And when she returned from school after completing the school, she became a kindergarten teacher. Unfortunately, the peaceful life didn't last long in Czechoslovakia. And Czechoslovakia became Hitler's target for annexations. And when you look on the northern, western, and southern border of Czechoslovakia, the blue color, that's called Sudetenland, with the Bohemian German population. In end of September 1938, Hitler ceded the Sudetenland to Germany. There is a very small part on the top middle that is darker pink that was annexed to Poland. And 1 month later, in November 1938, the southern part of Czechoslovakia, the green section, was forced to cede to Hungary. And this is where both sides of my family lived, in southern Slovakia. So now my parents, both sides of my grandparents and my parents, who were Czechoslovak, were no longer Czechoslovak. Suddenly they became Hungarian. And I'm going to stop sharing for a minute so I can tell you a little bit. And as I mentioned to you, my father was married before the war to his first wife. And as soon as they became Hungarian, all the male, Hungarian Jewish male that was capable of work, they were required to serve in the mandatory Hungarian forced labor service. So my father, with other Hungarian men, was called away from home, from his family, to serve. They served unarmed because, according to the Hungarians, the Jews were not reliable. They were unreliable to serve in the armed military. They were guarded by the Hungarian Nyilas, anti-Semitic fascist Arrow Cross troops, who were very brutal often, and they were required to do very strenuous work, a lot of constructions, building bridges and all kinds of under harsh and brutal conditions. Erne, my father, survived because he escaped with the help of a righteous Gentile. Now, Hungary was allied with Germany during World War II, and together with the Axis powers, they invaded in middle of 1941, they invaded the Soviet Union. The battles near Stalingrad were very fierce, and Germany was defeated, and Hungary had substantial losses. So they decided to back out in secret, to back out from the alliance with the Germans. Hitler found out this was not acceptable to Hitler, and German troops invaded Hungary on March 19, 1944. Adolf Eichmann arrived to Budapest. He was in charge of deportations of the Hungarian Jews. Hungarian Jews were the largest remaining Jewish population in Central Europe. Other countries already were got rid of the Jews. Even Eichmann was surprised to see how enthusiastically the Hungarians collaborated with him. My mother, Itza, her much younger sister, Babi, who was only 16 years old, and their parents were forced to leave their home and most of their possessions and they were ordered to move into a ghetto. Jewish people from all surrounding areas were brought to the same ghetto, including from my father's hometown. So while Erne, my father, was away in the forced labor unit, his family, his wife, his daughter, his parents, and other family members were forced out of their homes and moved into the ghetto. I'm going to share with you how her parents hired the German governess and she was sent to German school. She was asked to translate and be a messenger. And because she had to take messages across the vast area of the munition factory and that vast area, she had this ID pin. That's why she was given the ID pin. She was told, when there is no messages to take or no translation, then we want you to clean the premises of the factory. Well, they were starving just as much as in Auschwitz. They were starving in Hesse-Schlichtenau also. And when they got back late in the evening to their barracks, they always talked about food. They were so hungry. They talked about food. They dreamed about food. And they shared recipes. These women would huddle together in the barracks in the evenings and talk about food and share recipes. And the memory of the pre-war life was a powerful survival tool. And talking about food was essential because it gave them hope. The long shifts ended. I want to mention that every morning and every evening they walked 1.5 hours from the factory to the barracks. And when they got to the barrack, they were exhausted and they were famished. So my mother wanted to write down these recipes that the other women shared with her, and the cleaning duties provided. They proved to be advantageous to her because while she was cleaning in the factory, she found a stack of paper in the wastebasket. She pilfered the paper when nobody saw her. She tore the bottom of her long, ragged, she called it a summer coat because it had buttons, but it was very thin and flimsy. She tore the seams of that summer coat, made it into a pouch and hid the paper inside this pouch inside her coat. She also found a tiny little pencil, just a small little pencil she found. And she began to write recipes. As the women were talking in the barracks about food and about recipes, she began to write them down. The papers that she pilfered, on one side, it had information about the ammunition that this munition factory was manufacturing and using to annihilate the Jews during the war. And the other side of the paper was blank and suitable for writing. So I would like to show you a few of these papers. I should mention to you that my mother wrote and collected over 600 recipes, and it was always hiding with her inside her coat. So this one, you see, it's a 5 centimeter light mortar that was used during World War II. And on the other side, she wrote the recipe for almond pudding. It was given to her by Pani. Pani survived Auschwitz, and when she was in the Hesse-Schlichtenau munition factory with her sister, both she and her sister, with another over 200 women who could not keep up with the strenuous work in the munition factory, were taken back to Auschwitz. So Pani did not survive. This one is R mine 43, which was a German steel-cased anti-tank bar mine. And my mother wrote the vanilla cream for the Napoleon pastries. SD-50 was a thick-walled explosive bomb. It was a fragmentation bomb used by Luftwaffe during World War II. She wrote a recipe for wasp nest given to her by Piri. Sadly, Piri survived both Auschwitz and Hesse-Schlichtenau, but died during the death march, was shot and murdered, killed, she died there. Entry ticket to Hesse, you can see Hesse-Schlichtenau, entry ticket. This, if Nazi officials had to enter the premises, they had to fill out and sign and date this ticket. And Itza wrote chestnut roulade, given to her by Irene. This was fig and nut slices by Mariška, written on the SC-250, which was an airdropped general purpose high explosive bomb. And this bomb weighed 550 pounds, 250 kilograms. Magdalena cookies were written on SC-50, which was a cylindrical explosive bomb used by Luftwaffe during World War II. And this was a delivery entrance ticket. And she wrote dumplings with sweet farmer cheese given to her by Mariška. In the book, I translated 6 recipes. Top 12 o'clock are the Linzer cookies filled with jam in the middle. Clockwise going to the right are the Ischler cookies. On the bottom right, the almond tort. On the very bottom middle is the famous gerbo, Hungarian gerbo salad, and the sour cherry cake. And to the left it's all one recipe, is the wasp nest. And I wanted to show you why it's called the wasp nest. And those are filled with walnuts. I'm just going to go back to this one. And I want to tell you that, as I mentioned, my mother wrote over 600 recipes. And this was her way of indirect resistance, her way to defy the Nazis, because they took away so much. They took away everything, their family, their community, their hair, their clothes, even their name. They were just a number to the Nazis. But there was one thing that they couldn't take away. She still had the power to decide that she decided to write these recipes and just remain hopeful. And already Allied troops were approaching. They could hear gunfire. So Hitler ordered that all the Jews should be gassed. So Hesse-Schlichten ammunition factory was evacuated end of March 1945. And they were put on trains. And I don't think I will have the time to read for you the small excerpt, but I just want to tell you quickly that the train couldn't go all the way to where they wanted to take them, to Theresienstadt, Terezin in Czech Republic concentration camp, because Germany was bombarded by the Allies. So they got off in Leipzig, where they stayed overnight. From Leipzig, they decided to still take them to Terezin concentration camp, to the gas chambers, but by foot. So began the death march. The death march, whoever could not keep up walking to the border of Czech Republic was shot, and there was no longer daily rations, so the food was even scarcer. People were dying during the death march of hunger, of exhaustion. Excuse me. But suddenly the women looked and they noticed there are no more Nazi guards. The Nazis were afraid to be caught because the Allies were so close, so they abandoned the transport. The women were all alone, and they began to walk toward still in Germany, toward the border of Czechoslovakia. And suddenly they saw an American Jeep approaching. The Jeep came to a stop, and 4 American soldiers stepped out of the Jeep. And Itza explained to one of them, who was from Ohio and spoke a little bit of German, who they are. They were liberated on this day, end of April 25, 1945, and they were taken by these American soldiers back to Wurzen in Germany, where they were treated by the doctors. They survived, so they were liberated, and I just want to tell you that some of these women did not survive. The ones who shared the recipes with my mother. But those who did survive are no longer alive. So the recipes and the stories will live on for many generations to come. And I want to show you that this is already in the United States. The recipes made it safely back to Czechoslovakia with my mother, and they emigrated to the United States. And in the United States, my mother and I, we had an occasion where she baked a lot of different things. This was everything made by my mom, and we are looking at everything that she made. And as you know, I was an only child, growing up only with my mother and father, and very little family who survived. Today, this is our family, my husband and 3 children with their spouses and grandchildren. And we have, thank God, we have 6 beautiful grandchildren who all live in town. Elie Wiesel, a Holocaust survivor, Nobel laureate, said, "When you listen to a witness, you become a witness." And I want to share with you quotation by a pastor, Martin Niemöller, who was a German Lutheran minister. And he said, "First, they came for the socialists, and I did not speak up. I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionist, and I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. And then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak." As Elie Wiesel said, to remain silent and indifferent is the greatest sin of all. And just a closing remarks. These are my parents when they were already much older. My mother was 90 here, my father 93. 6 million European Jews were murdered during the Holocaust. And by Nazi Germany and also by the collaborators. And Jews were the primary victims of the Holocaust, but there were many other victims. The horrors of the Holocaust were the result of hatred, and we all must learn from it so that history will not repeat itself. Kindness and compassion must win over hatred. I am going to stop sharing with you now. And I just want to end that in the book, Hidden Recipes, I also write about injustice after the Holocaust and how my parents met after the war. I write about the life behind the Iron Curtain and about the immigration to the United States. The recipes were donated to the Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C. And I just one quick little note to tell you that there are so many lessons that I learned. I learned from my parents. They went through such difficult times. And now this year has been so difficult for all of us. So I often think back to my parents. What would they have told me? What is it that they did? How did they made it through those difficult times? And I think the first thing is to adapt to the circumstances that you cannot change. Like we are in the midst of a pandemic. We have no choice but adapt to the circumstances, no matter how difficult it is. And never lose hope. Always remain hopeful. My mother said those who lost hope, they did not make it. So always remain hopeful and never give up. Life is just too precious, and stay positive. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was very touching. Right now is a time for questions. If anyone has questions. Myra said, thank you very much for telling your amazing and important story. And I think I'm sure we all feel that way. And what a blessing. You commented that your mother kept everything, and what a blessing that she did. That is remarkable.
Yes, thank you.
But such inspiring parents.
Thank you. I would like to mention one more thing, if I may, Rebecca.
Absolutely.
That both my parents never lost their faith throughout all this time. I think this is so important. They never blamed God. They blamed man for what happened to them. So I think this is so important to mention.
Yes. Okay, Tom has a question. Thank you for sharing your family story. There's nothing more human than cooking together and sharing recipes. It brings the Holocaust down to a very human level. Do your grandchildren have interest in the story you have told us?
So the grandchildren, thank you so much for your question. The grandchildren, most of them are still very young. The youngest one is only 2. There are 2 cousins that are only 6. The older ones, the oldest one is the one who's very interested. And when I just turned 12 years old. And when I published the book 1 year ago, she said, "Grandma, please, can I have my own book?" And I had to tell her stories, and I had to be very careful to not to scare her, not to say the horrible things. But yes, she knows the story. And she also likes to bake. And she loves the pastries that I make. I continue baking the pastries that my mom passed on. And now I'm passing on to her. She already asked for the recipes, and her favorite one is the sour cherry one. She just absolutely, and also, so my oldest granddaughter, Isabel, the 12-year-old, already made a sour cherry cake by herself during the pandemic. And the next grandchild is Jacob, who is 11 years old. His favorite are the Linzer cookies, those round cookies with the powdered sugar on the top that are jam. It has jam in between. That's his favorite. And the grandchildren, even the younger one, do come, had come before the pandemic, came to our house, and we baked together. We would make cookies together. So hopefully when this is all over, we can be together again and doing things.
Great. There's a couple of comments in the chat. Resistance comes in so many forms. Thank you for sharing hope and the life lessons from your parents. And then another person wrote, "Such an amazing story. Thank you so much for sharing this. I look forward to reading the book." And Ava's book is available through Amazon and at all bookstores, she assured me. I asked her if there ones in particular. She said, no, all bookstores. So there aren't more questions. So would you like to read from your book?
Yes, I would love to read an excerpt from the book. This is when Hesse-Schlichten ammunition factory was evacuated, and they were going to go all the way to the Czech Republic by train, but Germany was bombarded heavily during the war, so they couldn't continue, and they got off the train in Leipzig, Germany. In Leipzig, they stayed overnight in a vacant Hitler Youth building. The Allies did not know that the building had been evacuated by the Nazis and was instead being occupied by the women, and consequently the Allies started to bomb it during the night. As the Allies shot phosphorus and dropped magnesium flare bombs to illuminate the building and started to fly lower with their airplanes, they were surprised to see women running out of the building. Immediately they stopped the bombing, but part of the building was already in flames. A few women died, but the majority of them escaped by running out of the building in the middle of the night. Itza ran outside with the others, but then realized she had forgotten the pouch with the recipes inside the building. My recipes! I forgot my recipes! She turned around and ran back to rescue her precious recipe collection. Her sister and others cried out to her, Itza, what are you doing? Don't go back inside. But she did not listen, exclaiming to them, I have to get my recipes. And she ran back into the burning building.
Wow.
And she did rescue the recipes. Those recipes were very precious to her. And I don't know, was it Tom who asked me about the cooking and baking? Or somebody asked me. When I think back to my childhood, so my mother always baked. All her life she baked. Every week she baked. She made something. But thinking back to my childhood, I remember she would bring out this collection of recipes that she kept in a large, like aluminum box, like the butter cookies come in that aluminum. This was a larger one, and she kept the recipes in this box, and she would bring them out and take a few and spread them. I think she already knew which one were for pastries, because there were all kinds, and she would spread a few of the recipes on the table, look through them, and remembering the women that she was with, and telling a few stories about them. And she would bake those. So this is my memory. And she would bake those pastries. She also was already good prior to the war, was good with baking and cooking, because her mother believed that it is important that she learns how to bake and how to cook. So it was a combination of recipes from prior to the war and recipes that she collected during the war.
So there's a couple of questions.
Yes.
One will be quick. Are there English translations for the recipes?
I translated only 6 recipes into English. One of them, the almond tart, was so difficult because it said a bar of chocolate, and I couldn't figure out. I couldn't find information. How large is a bar? How large was a bar in World War II? Before World War II, I messed up 2 times. The 3rd time, it finally turned out good. So I managed to translate 6 recipes. Some of them my mom often made, so that was much easier to translate to English. The over 600 recipes, I have a lot of requests people would like. And I'm considering to have a second book one day with those 600 recipes, but it would be just a direct translation from Hungarian to English. I cannot make them and to make sure that it come out good. So it would be more like a documentation of those recipes. That's a possibility.
And so this is a more involved question, but I hope you can answer.
Yes.
This is from Myra. I wonder if you have some thoughts on why the leadership of Germany and Hungary today have such different views on disenfranchised people, such as immigrants, Germany's leader being more open than Hungary.
I'm very disappointed how Hungary is handling things. I don't like to get into the politics, but I'm very, very disappointed in the leadership in Hungary, how they are doing things. I just probably prefer to end it here. I disagree with many things that Orban does, and his values are very different than the values that are important to me.
Mm-hmm. I understand. So thank you so much. And just as a reminder, what a gift this story is to us, but also this is a tremendous gift to share with families at this time of year.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
So it's available, and I know I will be getting several copies.